Welcome to you. We're getting very much towards the end of the liturgical year. We're getting towards the end of Mark, and we suddenly have this very famous and sometimes, I think, abused passage from the more apocalyptic language of Mark. So, Lucy, welcome. John, welcome. Jeremy, no arguments between father and daughter, please. Let's go and have some background on this really quite, not controversial, but hot sort of a passage. John.
The temple. I mean, here we have the disciples saying, wow, look at those huge stones. You know, some of them were apparently 12 meters long, 3.6 high, and 5.5 wide. And the building itself, it was massive. You know, the center of it, 7 stories high. This was Herod the Great's initiative, begun in 20 BC, and it took 37 years to complete. No, 46, I think. It's a wonder of the ancient world. It was phenomenal. And even the bridge across the valley to the entrance, that was 140 meters long and 15 meters wide, and massive stones again. And how were they quarried? Who shaped them? How in the world did they ever get them on site? And there was gold. There was gold on the walls, there was gold on the doors, there was gold on some of the floors, and the building was whitewashed, so the whole thing gleamed in the sunlight. It was a stunning spectacle. And the Romans destroyed it. There are inscriptions in Rome of soldiers carrying off treasures from the temple, and the gold was taken and it was used to build the Colosseum. How in the world did the Romans manage to destroy it without explosives? I don't know. But anyway, we move on. And Jesus says, after all that astonishment, beware that no one deceives you. Yeah, people deceived. There were lots of heresies birthed. There was adoptionism, which said God adopted Jesus at birth. There was Arianism, which said Jesus was not divine, but a creation of God. And Gnosticism, Jesus was not really human, only seemed to be so. Oh, there were lots of those early, and there are plenty of modern ones. And then, Jesus says, disasters, heresies, wars, earthquakes, famines. And within 40 years of this incident, there was the eruption of Vesuvius, there was the earthquake that destroyed Laodicea, and there was famine in Rome under Claudius, all within 40 years of this saying. So, Jesus was very much aware of the disasters that can happen. So here are some of the factors behind our reading today.
That's helpful. And, they were apocalyptic times, and I'm going to dare to suggest that we live in apocalyptic times now, because there have been many, and there may be many more. We don't know. All right, not for me to say, but let's unpack from that. And Lucy, what do you find challenging?
Plenty to be challenged with. One of the key things I was thinking of as I read this is we live in an age where people are obsessed with apocalyptic literature and want to predict end times. And it sort of seems like with every new president in the United States or leader in some other country or natural disaster, somebody's putting up their hand and saying, here are end times. But the challenge that I've walked away from reading it this week is how much time do we spend living now in right relationship with God rather than becoming obsessed with what will happen tomorrow? Jesus teaches in another spot, do not worry about tomorrow because today has enough worries of its own. And so the challenge that I have is, are we prayerfully and honestly coming before God every new morning and saying, God, help me to be present in today. Help me to lay all my worries and concerns on you in a week of who knows what will unfold. To what extent are we pausing to come before God and recommit our hearts and minds to his narrative over and above the fair narrative of our society?
Thank you, Lucy. And challenging indeed, and refocuses it, doesn't it? Jeremy, for you, what do you find challenging?
I suppose I'm reading this and I'm trying to think, what does that mean today? Because actually Vesuvius doesn't bother me anymore, and the temple coming down. Of course, we've got the American election on Guy Fawkes Day, which I feel is got potential for current times. But it's Jesus' words when he talks about not being led astray and how easy it is to look around and think of things that seem easier than what he suggests we do. And I fear very much that, when somebody says to me, what does Christianity mean? And I want to talk about God's love and how much he cares for us. And I don't want to talk about judgment and there being rules. Because you think if people just come here, it will be good for them. But of course it's just another heresy if I try to cherry pick part of the message and don't commit to the whole of it.
So I hear an appeal there to hold on to the central tenets of our faith. I'm going to say a word in a minute or two, possibly about Christian nationalism, but it may come out from somebody else. John, what for you is challenging? You've given us some background.
The challenge, I think, is to look to Jesus rather than the disasters that can happen. Look to Jesus. He's highlighting the vulnerability that we live with. There are wars today. They're depressing. The Alpine fault's going to go sooner or later. Climate change is getting into the red zone. I mean, will Auckland have another volcanic eruption? Disaster. There are threats everywhere. And we're called to turn your eyes upon Jesus. Don't let your hearts be troubled, he said. Trust in God, trust also in me. That's the challenge.
Okay, this is pretty heavy stuff. So Jeremy, let's dig out some good news from what we're reading.
I think that God is speaking to us and he's saying that he's given us this gospel, this good news of hope, and we've not to get distracted. There's lots of other things we could think of. We could just latch on to the easy bits. But he's saying, no, think of the entire message. Think of all that I've told you, all that I've asked you to do, and commit yourself to doing it.
It's a whole of life claim on us, isn't it? Thank you for that, Jeremy.
It is, and it seems such an easy heresy to avoid all the sort of contradictions. We're saying God is love, but also God is justice. And maybe we'd like his love, but we could do with just skipping this justice.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. And let me ask you, John, after all you've said, give us some good news as well.
Many years ago, I heard Corrie ten Boom speaking of her experience in the concentration camp. I think it was in Chicago. And she said, there is no depth to which we fall that he is not deeper still. In the face of disasters, Jesus is saying, do not be alarmed, do not be disturbed. And disasters are not the end, Jesus is saying. We've got Teilhard de Chardin and people like Cynthia Bourgeois and all the rest of them saying that these too are birth pains we're going through. There's a new consciousness dawning in humanity. But yeah, we must remember the good news. God is always in the business of making new futures possible. Walter Brueggemann asserts that we are to traffic in the fiction that makes true.
Right, thank you. And you put some really helpful names out there as well. So, Lucy, good news for you?
Yeah, plenty of good news here. One of the things that I've been reflecting on is that often, again, going back to the American election, we put all our hope in a leader and we think this person's going to make the world right, or this person's going to lead us and we're going to be safe and secure. And time again, we watch that leader rise up and fall down. And we think, oh my goodness, what is going on? We put all our hope in that person. And it's a reminder for us that this doesn't come as a surprise to God. God is still sovereign and king over all things. And as we hear in this passage, Jesus is not only predicting what happens 40 years later, but he holds the whole narrative of history in his heart and in his mind. He knows what was before and he knows what will come. And so the good news for me is recognizing that actually I follow Jesus, who's king, not whoever's the current Prime Minister of New Zealand or the coalition or another nation, and that I'm able to give my whole life in service of him, knowing that he will be working away and into his good for the world and the nations.
Thank you, Lucy. And I think that just does give me the chance to say when we put the nation itself ahead of Jesus, I think we're entering into one of those heresies. And I think that's the crash course in Christian nationalism for this evening. Finally, then, let us apply and find the so what for this. Jeremy, so what?
Actually, I'm a little taken aback because I realise we've come to the end of the good news and we missed the key message. Jesus is coming again.
And it's interesting you should highlight that because we're a little bit coy outside the more evangelical circles, some of us outside that, and we get coy about talking about the great doctrine of the Jesus who will return. So thank you. Let's see, Lucy, what you see as a so what here.
Yeah, definitely. So the so what for me is that recognition of, so to what extent am I this week in this moment pausing to examine where I've been led astray. We live in a world of disinformation, and it's amazing how quickly people believe one thing or another and get led down an incredibly quick rabbit hole. And so even for us, as we watch and pray over our news, we can wonder, whose side are we on? US election, whose side do we want to win? Gaza, whose side do we want to win? Ukraine and Russia, whose side do we want to win? Everywhere we look, there's a sense in which we're being asked to put our allegiance towards someone or something, whereas actually our hearts are called to the allegiance of Jesus Christ above all else. And when he admonishes us and challenges us, do not be led astray. It's don't put your heart in something that isn't me. Don't put your heart in the things that are created. Put your heart and your hope in the Creator.
And so in this world of what some people like to call zero sum and this binary world, you're putting in there this really critical other alternative of focusing on Jesus, the promise that Jeremy's spoken of as well. John, a final word.
Yes, well, just following on what Lucy has said, the call here to look to Jesus, not to the disasters, not to the Putins and Netanyahus and all of them, because Jesus is bigger than all of them. The so what here, Jesus called to watch out, to be on your guard, to take care that no one is deceiving you. So to remember that here is Jesus in the face of this mind-bogglingly, incredibly vast cosmos. He showed up on this micro dot of a planet to show us the way of God, And he says, you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world.
There is nothing to add to that. Thank you, the three of you. I will just add thank you. And Jeremy, John, Lucy, this has been wonderful. So encouraging. Thank you very much.